The council chamber of the Zorathian Empire was a grand hall of silver arches and floating light orbs, a place where leaders of worlds gathered to decide the fate of lesser civilizations. On this day, the great chamber echoed with laughter. Alien. Commanders and diplomats leaned back in their seats, showing their sharp teeth or gleaming fangs as they watched the live feed from the outer edge of the Sol system. There, orbiting near the cold edge of Pluto's path, floated Earth's fleet. It was barely more than a dozen small ships, each looking thin and fragile compared to the towering dreadnoughts of the Zorathian Navy. The flagship's viewing screen magnified the image, showing human ships painted with dull gray armor and marked with the flag of a blue planet. Admiral Kraith, the supreme commander of the Empire's fleets, let out a low, mocking hiss that made his underlings nod in agreement. "This is the defense of Earth?" he said, his voice dripping with scorn. "These metal toys?" Around him, other admirals chuckled, one slapping the table with a long, clawed hand. "Perhaps they will fight us with rocks," another sneered, his tentacles curling with amusement. The laughter grew louder as the aliens shared old rumors about humans, how their engines were slow, their weapons outdated, their population too small to stand against a real power. News broadcasters across the Empire were already sending out headlines to trillions of citizens. The war that will last. One day. In the center of the chamber, a large holographic map displayed the battlefield. The alien fleet, hundreds of ships, strong, surrounded the human force like wolves around a wounded prey. Every expert agreed that Earth's defeat was inevitable. "Our fleet will crush them in hours," Admiral Kraith declared, raising a claw. "By nightfall, Earth will kneel to the Empire." He had no doubt. Why should he? The Zorathians had conquered dozens of worlds far more advanced than Earth. But far away, aboard the human command ship Resolute, Captain Elias Ward stood silently on his bridge, watching the same map with a calm expression. His crew moved with quiet discipline, their voices steady, their hands on controls. No one was panicking. No one even looked nervous. To anyone who did not know better, it would seem. The humans had accepted their fate. In the Zorathian Council, the laughter continued, but in the human fleet there was only stillness, like the pause before a storm. The alien intelligence officers noticed something strange. Humans were not forming defensive walls or preparing to retreat. Instead, their ships drifted slowly in a loose formation, almost inviting attack. "Pathetic," one alien analyst said to the council. "They don't even know how to arrange for proper defense." But the truth was, they knew exactly what they were doing. Captain Ward glanced at his communication officer. "Any word?" The officer nodded, passing him a small data pad with a single message displayed in green letters. "Proceed to stage 2. Ward read it once, then handed it back. "Understood. Hold position," he ordered, his voice calm as if discussing routine patrol duty. Back in the Alien Council, Admiral Kraith gave the signal to move. Across the Sol system, the Zorathian war machine came alive. Hundreds of warships surged forward, engines burning bright, weapons charging. News feeds showed the spectacle to the galaxy, the arrogant predators about to crush their prey. Alien commentators mocked human courage, comparing them to insects, standing against a hurricane. Some alien civilians even made bets on how many minutes the human ships would last once the first shot was fired. But as the alien fleet closed the distance, the humans did not react. No missiles fired, no evasive maneuvers. The silence from Earth's defenders made the alien commanders uneasy, though they would never admit it aloud. "Perhaps they have, frozen in fear," one joked over the comms. "Perhaps," Kraith replied, but his eyes narrowed slightly. On the Resolute, Captain Ward studied the tactical display as alien ships swarmed closer. He knew his fleet could not match the enemy, in open combat. That was never the plan. He had been given a different kind of weapon, one the aliens could not imagine. "Send the signal," he said quietly. The communication officer hesitated for only a heartbeat before pressing a single button. A burst of encrypted data shot through space, invisible to alien sensors. It traveled far beyond the battlefield, to a point where the darkness of space seemed endless. Then, in the deepest corner of the system, something ancient and massive began to move. Far away, alien long-range sensors picked up the faintest gravitational fluctuation, too small to be a threat, or so they thought. In the Zorathian council chamber, a few technical officers noticed the anomaly and sent data to Admiral Kraith, but he waved it away. "Focus on the human fleet. End this quickly," he commanded. The laughter returned, but in the human ships, a different sound began to rise, the low, distant hum of power being awakened. The crew of the Resolute could feel it through the decks, a vibration in the bones, a reminder that they were not as weak as they appeared. In that moment, Captain Ward allowed himself a small smile, a smile the aliens would later remember with dread. "They think they're hunting us," he thought, "but they've already walked into the trap." Outside, the alien fleet spread wide, preparing to surround and destroy the human ships in one synchronized strike. The galaxy watched, certain of the outcome. But in the darkness beyond Neptune, something enormous was coming, and the stars themselves would soon vanish from view. The alien fleet moved closer, their formation tightening like a noose, their weapons charging as beams of light flickered along the edges of massive warships. Inside the command deck of the Resolute, Captain Elias Ward stood with his hands behind, his back, his eyes fixed on the holographic battle map. The alien icons swarmed forward like an approaching storm, red lights filling the outer edges of the display. His crew waited for orders, but Ward's voice remained calm. "Hold your positions," he said, the words soft yet firm. Around him, officers exchanged glances, knowing how unusual it was to let an enemy close without firing a single shot. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like Earth's fleet had frozen in fear, but the humans aboard the Resolute knew they were, following a very different kind of plan. A soft beep broke the tense silence as the communications officer straightened in his seat. "Captain, we've received a transmission," he said. Ward stepped forward, taking the small data tablet from the officer's hands. On the screen, in glowing green letters, was a short message from the Deep Command Network. "Proceed to Stage 2. Ward's jaw tightened slightly. "Confirmed," he replied, passing the tablet back. "Maintain our current course. Signal the fleet. No one fires until my order." Outside, the alien warships grew larger on the view screen, their hulls gleaming under the light of the distant sun. Alien captains sent mocking broadcasts across the open channels, taunting the humans with promises of quick surrender and mercy if they abandoned their weapons. None of the human ships replied. The silence irritated the Zorathian commanders, who preferred an enemy that screamed and begged. It made victory sweeter in their eyes. Admiral Kraith, sitting in the high throne of the alien flagship, leaned forward and bared his sharp teeth. "They are either braver or more foolish than I thought," he muttered. His second-in-command, a thin insectoid officer with twitching antennae, chuckled. "Foolish, my lord. Only fools face the Zorathian Empire with such weakness." Yet even as he said the words, something about the human fleet's stillness unsettled him. It was as if they were waiting for something unseen. Back aboard the Resolute, Ward tapped the intercom. "All ships, prepare for phase change," he said. "Engineering, ready the shield harmonics. Navigation, stand by for coordinate shift on my mark." His voice remained calm, but deep inside, every officer felt the growing weight of what was about to happen. Beyond Neptune's orbit, in the cold reaches of space, A massive signal pulse had been sent. It traveled faster than light through a network of hidden relays scattered through the outer solar system, a network no alien spy had ever discovered. The pulse reached its destination in the far darkness, a place where the stars were faint and nothing stirred. Until now. Sensors. Aboard the alien fleet began to pick up a new reading, a gravitational fluctuation at the far edge of their scanners. At first, it was so faint it barely registered. The alien analysts flagged it as background noise, perhaps a drifting asteroid or the gravity shadow of a small moon. Reports were sent to Admiral Kraith, but he brushed them aside. Ignore. The humans are here, in front of us. Focus on the kill. The analysts obeyed, though a few could not shake the feeling that something strange was approaching. On alien news networks, commentators laughed openly, playing side-by-side images of the mighty Zorathian fleet and the tiny human ships. Betting pools spread across multiple star systems. How many human vessels would be destroyed in the first volley, and whether the battle would end in 10 minutes or 5. But in the human command centers on Earth and Luna, no one laughed. The highest levels of military command watched the feed in silence, eyes fixed on the same data Captain Ward had just received. They knew what Stage 2 meant, and they knew the signal that had been sent would change the battle completely. Ward stood at the forward viewport, gazing into the void. The alien fleet was almost within firing range now, their enormous dreadnoughts casting long shadows across the darkness. They're so confident, he thought, so certain of their victory. He allowed the moment to stretch, waiting until every alien captain believed the humans had accepted their fate. Then he gave the quiet order. Transmit the lock code. The communications officer tapped a sequence into her console, sending another encrypted burst toward the far edge of the system. The aliens didn't notice. It was masked as harmless static. Seconds later, far in the deep void, something began to awaken. Massive plates of metal the size of continents shifted in the dark, scraping against each other with a sound no one could hear but everyone would soon feel. Lights flickered to life on a structure so vast it blotted out the distant starlight. Its engines, dormant for decades, began to hum with a low vibration that rippled through the emptiness. The humans called it the Aegis. The aliens didn't even know it existed. On the Zorathian flagship, Admiral Kraith's sensors officer frowned at his console. Sir, the anomaly is growing in mass. It's significant. Kraith's eyes narrowed. How significant? The officer hesitated. Significant enough to block sensor readings behind it. It's absorbing light. Kraith snorted. A black hole? Impossible in this sector. The officer didn't reply. The readings didn't match a black hole, but whatever it was coming closer. Back on the Resolute, Ward glanced at the timer on his display. 4 minutes, he said quietly. The crew knew what that meant. In 4 minutes, the enemy would see something they could never unsee. In 4 minutes, the war would change forever. Alien ships continued to close, in their weapons primed. One Zorathian captain, eager to claim the first kill, requested permission to fire early. Kraith denied it. We strike as one and we erase them completely, he growled. The humans seemed so small in the vastness of space, so fragile, so doomed. And yet, in that smallness, there was a confidence the aliens did not understand. Ward stood like a statue, hands clasped behind his back as the enemy crept nearer. Behind him, the helmsman glanced at his console, eyes wide. Captain, he whispered. Signal received from the Aegis. Arrival sequence has begun. Ward's lips curved into a faint smile. Good, he said. Hold steady. Let them come. Outside, the stars beyond the alien fleet began to dim, one by one, as if a shadow was spreading through space. The Zorathian officers dismissed it as sensor interference, but the humans knew better. The shadow was real, and soon it would blot out the sky. The alien fleet reached its attack position, hundreds of warships forming a vast crescent around the tiny human force, their glowing weapons aimed like spears ready to strike. The Zorathian commanders moved with cold precision, transmitting attack coordinates to every vessel in their armada. On the flagship, Admiral Kraith leaned forward, his eyes locked on the display where the human ships floated in stillness. "On my mark," he said slowly, savoring the moment. Across the galaxy, trillions of viewers tuned in to watch what they believed would be the swift destruction of Earth's defenders. In the alien fleet, gun crews gripped their controls, targeting computers hummed, and missile bays unlocked. But aboard the human command ship Resolute, Captain Elias Ward remained, calm, his voice steady as he spoke to his crew. "Hold formation. All ships, prepare for synchronized maneuver on my signal." His eyes flicked to the timer on his display, less than a minute until the Aegis arrived. Out in the far reaches of space, the shadow that had been growing now towered against the stars. It was not a black hole, nor a natural object. It was a machine, a ship of such colossal size that even the largest alien dreadnought could have sailed through its main hangar without touching the walls. Its surface was armored in dark plating that seemed to drink in light, its edges sharp and alien, yet unmistakably human in design. Engines the size of mountains glowed faintly as they pushed the titanic vessel forward. Inside the alien fleet, panic began to flicker in the voices of sensor operators. "Admiral, we have a massive contact entering the battle space," one reported. "Massive!" Kraith snapped. "Define massive." The officer swallowed hard. "Sir, it's larger than any ship we've ever recorded, 20 times the mass of your flagship." Kraith froze for half a heartbeat before snarling, "Impossible. Our scans of the system found no such vessel." But the evidence was already filling the view screens. The darkness moved with purpose, its silhouette dwarfing even the combined Zorathian armada. In the Resolute, the crew felt a deep vibration through the deck as the Aegis sent a final arrival ping, one long, resonating tone that filled the comms. Ward allowed himself the smallest nod. "Signal to all ships, execute Phase 3. At once, the small human ships, which had seemed so passive before, shifted their positions with surgical precision, moving to create firing lanes for the Mothership. Alien commanders watching the maneuver realized, far too late, that the human fleet's earlier stillness had been deliberate, a trap designed to lure them into a perfect kill zone. Kraith roared for his fleet to open fire, but in that same instant, the Mothership's forward batteries ignited. A single beam of white-hot energy erupted from its main gun, slicing across the void and cutting straight through an alien battlecruiser. The ship didn't explode. It simply came apart, its massive hull splitting in two as molten fragments drifted into the dark. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The aliens had expected a desperate defense, not a weapon that could destroy their mightiest warships with one shot. Before they could regroup, the Aegis fired again, this time targeting a cluster of enemy destroyers. The beam swept through them like a blade through paper, leaving nothing but glowing wreckage. On the alien flagship, Kraith's voice thundered through the comm channels. "All ships, evasive maneuvers, break formation!" But breaking formation now only threw their fleet into chaos. The human small ships struck next, launching volleys of coordinated missiles and railgun fire, their attacks perfectly timed to follow in the wake of the Mothership's destruction. Every shot found its mark, guided by targeting data fed directly from the Aegis. For the first time in the battle, alien warships were the ones scattering, their once perfect assault collapsing into desperate retreat patterns. The betting pools across the galaxy vanished from screens as news networks switched from mocking headlines to urgent alerts. Words like unprecedented, unknown superweapon and human technological leap flashed across alien broadcasts. But in the heart of the chaos, Ward stood unmoving, watching the enemy fleet crumble piece by piece. His voice came low but firm. Advance the line. Push them back. The smaller human vessels surged forward, forcing the aliens toward the gravitational well of a nearby gas giant, limiting their escape vectors. The mothership followed at a steady pace, each step of its engines sending ripples through space, like a predator closing in on its prey. Alien captains tried to regroup, but each attempt was met with instant annihilation. A destroyer squadron tried to flank the mothership, only for the Aegis to turn slightly and unleash a side-mounted plasma array, enveloping the attackers in a sphere of fire until nothing remained. Kraith's flagship was now the largest surviving vessel in his fleet, but even it looked small compared to the human colossus. "Retreat is dishonor," he snarled to his bridge crew, "but annihilation is worse. Signal the jump drives. We fall back to the outer rim." Yet even as he gave the order, the mothership's sensors locked onto him. Ward's targeting officer spoke quietly. "Flagship identified, Captain. Firing solution ready." Ward considered for a moment, then shook his head. "Let him live. Let him tell them what he saw." The weapons officer hesitated but obeyed. Instead, the mothership targeted the last of the alien heavy carriers, vaporizing it in an instant. The surviving alien ships fled into hyperspace, vanishing one by one. And then, for the first time since the battle began, silence returned to the system, broken only by the deep hum of the Aegis as it slowed to a halt. Across the galaxy, alien citizens sat in stunned silence, replaying the moment when the sky had gone dark and the ship they had never known existed revealed itself to the universe. They had mocked Earth's tiny fleet. Now they understood that those small ships were never meant to win. They were meant to bait the trap. And in the center of that trap was humanity's greatest weapon, waiting for the day it would finally be unleashed. The alien fleet was in disarray, scattering in all directions as the black giant known to the humans as the Aegis loomed larger in their view screens, its vast hull swallowing the starlight behind it until the space beyond seemed empty of light or life. The ship did not rush forward like the smaller human vessels. Instead, it advanced with the slow, inevitable pace of something that had no need to hurry, each pulse of its colossal engines rippling through the void and rattling the sensors of every alien craft within range. On the Zorathian flagship, Admiral Kraith sat rigid in his command throne, his sharp claws gripping the armrests, eyes fixed on the readings that defied everything he thought he knew about human technology. "That cannot be a human design," he growled. But deep in his mind, doubt began to grow, whispering that perhaps the humans were not as primitive as the Empire had believed. Around him, officers shouted status reports, their voices edged with fear as they tried to track the mothership's movement. The anomaly in space around the Aegis made accurate scanning almost impossible. Gravity waves bent sensor beams, and energy spikes overloaded targeting systems. Even visual confirmation was unreliable because the ship's black armor absorbed light so completely that only the faint outlines of its structure could be seen against the void. Every alien officer who saw it felt the same strange, instinctive unease, as though they were not looking at a machine, but at some vast, patient predator from the deep past. In the human fleet, the smaller ships had shifted to new positions, boxing in the retreat paths of alien stragglers and herding them toward the shadow of the mothership. Captain Elias Ward watched the tactical map with unblinking focus, his voice calm as he gave precise orders to cut off the enemy's escape without overextending his forces. His plan was not to wipe them out immediately, but to let the fear spread, to let the galaxy watch its proudest warriors trapped like prey between a hunter's teeth. The news feeds across alien space had already shifted from triumphant headlines to panicked speculation. Analysts debated whether the humans had received this mothership from a more advanced ally, or if they had secretly been building it in the hidden corners of their system for decades. Rumors spread that this was not a warship at all, but an ancient, weapon from a long-dead civilization that humans had somehow awakened. None of the rumors matched the truth, but Ward had no intention of clarifying. On the Zorathian flagship, Kraith's communications officer reported, "We are receiving wide-spectrum transmissions from the human fleet." Kraith snarled, "Put it through." The voice that came through was not shouting, not threatening. It was calm, cold, and utterly certain. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the United Earth Defense Command. Leave this system now, and tell your people that Earth is not to be mocked again." The transmission ended without waiting for a reply. The silence that followed, the only sound on the alien bridge was the deep hum of the Aegis echoing through the void. Kraith refused to be intimidated, but his crew felt the weight of those words. They had mocked these humans, but now they were running from them. Outside, the black giant rotated slowly, revealing the full breadth of its forward guns. Energy flared along its sides in brief pulses, like the heartbeat of some slumbering beast, each pulse feeding the terrifying hum that filled the comms. The alien ships closest to it began reporting strange malfunctions, navigation glitches, power surges, unexplained drops in shield strength, as if the space around the Aegis itself was hostile to their presence. Ward knew these were the effects of the Mothership's experimental gravity field, a system designed to weaken enemy systems before battle even began. He had kept it secret for years, waiting for the day it would be truly needed. Now, as the alien fleet faltered, the humans pressed forward. Smaller corvettes darted in to disable stragglers, leaving them adrift and helpless, their lights flickering. In the darkness, the galaxy was watching, and Ward intended for this image to be burned into their memories. Earth, once mocked for its weakness, now standing as the shadow that blotted out the stars. On alien civilian worlds, broadcasts showed the Aegis from every angle their reporters could capture, though the images never seemed to do it justice. Children clung to their parents, asking if the humans would come for them next. Politicians argued whether to prepare for war or beg for peace. In the Zorathian military, officers whispered among themselves about the wisdom of challenging Earth. Again. Kraith could feel control slipping through his claws, but pride was a poison he could not swallow. "We will regroup," he said to his crew. "We will study this thing, and we will find its weakness." Yet even as he spoke, another alien ship was torn apart in a single shot from the Mothership's main gun, its wreckage scattering into the void like ashes in the wind. Kraith's fleet was bleeding ships faster than it could escape, and the dark titan of the humans kept coming, unhurried, unstoppable, as if it knew the prey could not truly get away. The edge of the system seemed impossibly far to the aliens now. Each kilometer of retreat feeling like a lifetime, every moment haunted by the knowledge that the black ship was still behind them, still growing larger in their sensors, still darkening the stars. The black silhouette of the Aegis moved fully into the battle zone now, no longer half hidden by the distant darkness, but revealed in its terrible entirety against the faint glow of the stars. Its size was beyond comprehension. Alien warships that had seemed massive before now looked like fragile toys drifting in the shadow of a mountain. Every plate of its dark armor seemed designed to drink in light, giving it an almost supernatural presence, and strange geometric lines ran along its hull, pulsing faintly with a deep crimson glow, as if the ship itself was alive. From its forward section, vast cannons protruded like the fangs of some great beast, each capable of tearing through a city-sized vessel with a single shot. Alien commanders who had mocked humanity hours before now sat frozen at their control panels, their voices choked with disbelief as sensor readings confirmed the impossible. This ship was not only the largest they had ever seen, but its power. Readings exceeded even the theoretical limits their engineers had imagined. Across the galaxy, news broadcasts cut away from commentators mid-sentence as fresh images of the Aegis flooded in, the camera drones capturing the moment it turned its forward guns toward the heart of the Zorathian formation. Admiral Kraith stared at the monstrous craft, his claws digging into the arms of his throne as a cold realization washed over him. This was not the desperate last stand of a weak species. This was a calculated unveiling of power, and he had been lured here to witness it. On the Resolute, Captain Elias Ward stood in the center of his bridge, his voice steady as he gave the order. All units, clear firing lanes for the Mothership. Instantly, the smaller human ships broke formation, moving aside in perfectly coordinated arcs, their sudden precision leaving alien observers with the uneasy sense that this was not the first time these maneuvers had been practiced. Then, in the silence of space, the Aegis fired. A beam of pure, concentrated energy erupted from its primary cannon, the light so intense that every alien sensor in range temporarily overloaded. The beam struck an enemy battleship dead center, cutting through its shields in less than a second, and ripping it apart as if its armor were made of paper. The explosion that followed was silent in the vacuum of space, but its light painted the dark hull of the Aegis in flickering gold and red. Without pausing, the Mothership rotated slightly, bringing a second target into its sights. Another beam, another ship destroyed, its wreckage drifting in glowing fragments. On alien civilian worlds, crowds stood in public squares staring at the live footage, their earlier laughter now replaced by stunned silence. Even alien children who had been cheering for their empire's victory now clutched their parents with wide eyes, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. The Zorathian fleet tried to return fire, their heavy cannons lighting up the void with streams of energy. But the shots glanced off the Aegis's shimmering defensive field, a barrier so advanced that even the combined fire of multiple warships could not breach it. Inside the alien flagship, Kraith demanded damage reports from across his fleet, but every officer's voice carried the same tone: panic. Entire squadrons were gone, destroyed before they had even closed the distance, and the ships that survived were falling back without orders. In the human command net, Ward's voice was calm but decisive. Press forward, maintain pressure, force them toward the gravity well. The smaller ships obeyed instantly, herding the enemy into the path of the Mothership's guns. To the galaxy, the message was clear. Earth was no longer a fragile backwater world, it was a predator. And this was its first roar. As the Aegis advanced, its secondary weapons came online, launching swarms of guided plasma projectiles that streaked across the void like hunting birds, each one finding its mark with unerring accuracy. Alien destroyers vanished in bursts of blue flame. Corvettes were torn apart mid-flight, and even the fastest frigates could not escape the reach of the giant. In the council chambers of distant empires, leaders watched the broadcast and silently re-evaluated their stance toward humanity, some already drafting new treaties in their minds, others ordering secret research into building ships to match this terrifying creation. But for now, all eyes remained locked on the live battle, watching as the black giant carved its way through the once invincible Zorathian fleet. Kraith knew the tide had turned beyond recovery. Even if he managed to escape, the shame of this, defeat would echo across the galaxy. And yet, part of him understood the humans' strategy. They had not come here to destroy every ship. They had come here to make a point, to burn an image into the minds of all who saw it. The moment when the sky itself went dark and Earth's true power stepped into the light. In that moment, even the proudest warriors of the Zorathian Empire could not deny the truth. They had laughed at the tiny fleet, but the laughter had died in their throats when the Mothership appeared. The moment the Mothership's forward cannons ceased their initial fire, the void between the fleets was already littered with the burning remains of alien warships, their twisted hulls drifting like silent tombs under the cold light of distant stars. But there was no pause, no breath, for the Aegis was not a weapon built for mercy. It was a machine of relentless precision, and its second wave came without warning. From the dark flanks of the colossal vessel, entire banks of missile silos opened in perfect unison, releasing swarms of long, spear-like projectiles that shot forward faster than the eye could follow. Each missile carried its own guidance AI, adjusting course mid-flight to chase targets with deadly accuracy. The Zorathian destroyers, once the hunters of the galaxy, now found themselves the prey, their evasive maneuvers failing against weapons that seemed to anticipate their every move. Explosions flared across the battlefield, lighting up the black armor of the Aegis in flashes of orange and blue, each detonation marking another alien ship lost. The smaller human ships moved with lethal coordination, darting into blind spots. Created by the Mothership's onslaught, striking at disabled vessels to ensure no survivors could regroup. On the alien flagship, Admiral Kraith barked orders for a concentrated counterattack, directing his remaining heavy cruisers to focus. All fire on the Mothership's forward section. Massive beams of energy lanced across the void, converging on the black giant, but each one met the shimmering curve of its adaptive shield, which rippled like the surface of water and absorbed the full impact without a single breach. The Zorathians fired again and again, their weapons overheating, their crews pushing systems past safety limits, yet the result was the same. The Aegis simply kept coming. Inside the human command ship Resolute, Captain Elias Ward monitored the engagement with sharp, calculating eyes, issuing quiet, precise commands that kept his fleet one step ahead of the enemy's chaotic retreat. Corvette Wing 3, swing to intercept on Vector 7. Cruiser Vanguard, hold fire until my mark, he ordered, his voice never rising, his calm in stark contrast to the panic filling the alien channels. Then, with a flick of his hand, he gave the signal. All ships, unleash full salvo. Taos. Once every human vessel joined the Mothership's assault, filling the darkness with streaks of railgun fire, concentrated plasma bolts, and tightly packed missile formations that rained destruction on the Zorathian ships. The combined force was overwhelming. Enemy cruisers were split apart mid-turn, their reactor cores igniting into silent suns, while frigates were shredded by railgun slugs that tore through armor and hull in the blink of an eye. Alien pilots screamed warnings to each other over comms, their voices high with fear, as their formation disintegrated into chaos. Kraith watched his fleet shrink on the tactical display, each red icon winking out in sudden bursts of light, and he realized, with dawning horror, that the battle was not just being lost, it had never been theirs to win. The Aegis was not fighting to defend. It was fighting to demonstrate, every precise strike a message to the galaxy that humanity had stepped beyond fear and weakness into dominance. The Mothership's side batteries lit up again, sending arcs of energy into the fleeing ships, while its gravity projectors pulled smaller enemy vessels off course, dragging them into the path of waiting human guns. Across alien worlds, the live broadcast continued without interruption, every second driving the truth deeper into the minds of those watching, that Earth's rise could not be stopped by fleets or firepower. Kraith's pride urged him to fight to the last ship, but his survival instinct whispered that his death here would serve no purpose but to end his command in shame. "Signal the remaining ships," he growled at last. "All units disengage and retreat. Those who can, jump to hyperspace immediately." His officers obeyed, though many of the ships receiving the order were too damaged to comply, their drives offline, their crews trapped as the human fleet closed in. Ward saw the sudden shift on his own displays and understood the enemy was breaking. "Do not pursue beyond the designated perimeter," he ordered. "Let them run. We've made our point." Still, the destruction did not stop entirely. The Aegis targeted any ship attempting to fire while retreating, reducing it to wreckage with merciless efficiency. Within minutes, what had been one of the largest fleets in Zorathian history was nothing more than scattered debris fields and a handful of survivors limping into hyperspace. The silence that followed was heavier than the roar of battle, the kind of silence that only comes when something far greater than victory has been achieved. Fear. Ward stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his gaze fixed on the black giant that now hung motionless in the void. The mothership had spoken without words, its first salvo rewriting the balance of power in the galaxy, and everyone who had seen it would remember the day the sky went dark and Earth's shadow fell upon its enemies. The battlefield was quiet now, except for the occasional flicker of wreckage drifting past the cold light of distant suns, the silence broken only by the faint hum of scanning systems and the soft crackle of damage reports over comms. But for the Zorathians who had survived the slaughter, the quiet was worse than the noise of battle because it left them alone with their thoughts, and those thoughts were filled with images of the black giant that had destroyed their pride in minutes. Admiral Kraith sat in the command throne of his battered flagship, his claws tapping against the armrest in an unconscious rhythm, his eyes fixed on the tactical display where the remnants of his once proud fleet blinked as pale red icons, scattered across the void, each one limping toward the edge of the system, engines burning far hotter than safety limits allowed in their desperation to escape. Reports came in from his officers in broken voices. Hull breaches, life support failures, weapon systems offline. Yet the worst damage was not to their ships, but to their morale, for every survivor had seen the same thing. The Aegis was unstoppable, and its human escorts moved with such precision that it was clear this was not luck or desperation, but the execution of a strategy prepared long before the first shot was fired. Across the galaxy, alien leaders gathered in secure councils, watching the same battle footage, their expressions grave as they discussed what it meant for the future, their voices dropping when they spoke of the mothership's weapons, its shielding, its impossible speed for its size. Some wondered aloud if humanity had developed this ship in secret for decades, hiding its true capabilities while presenting itself as a minor power, lulling the galaxy into underestimating it. Others suspected darker possibilities, whispering about alien technology recovered from unknown sources or even ancient civilizations, but none could deny the truth that lay before them. Earth had just shifted the balance of power in a single battle. On the human side, Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge of the Resolute, reviewing the final reports of enemy losses with a quiet satisfaction he did not show on his face. He knew the true value of this victory was not the number of ships destroyed, but the message it sent, for fear could travel faster than fleets, and it would reach worlds the mothership had never even seen. He gave orders to begin controlled recovery operations, sending smaller ships to tow damaged enemy vessels that had not yet jumped away, not as an act of mercy, but as an opportunity to take prisoners and intelligence, for every captured ship was a treasure of data on enemy tactics and weaknesses. Meanwhile, the Aegis loomed in the center of the field, its dark hull absorbing the light of distant stars, the faint crimson glow of its energy lines pulsing like the heartbeat of some ancient predator, its presence alone enough to keep the enemy from reconsidering an attack. In Zorathian military command, the shock was spreading through the ranks like a contagion. Veterans who had once scoffed at the idea of human resistance now found themselves speaking in hushed tones, while strategists tore up old battle plans and began drafting new ones that no longer assumed human fleets could be outgunned or outmaneuvered. Kraith listened to his officers debate their next steps, some urging a regrouping of forces to launch a second strike, others insisting they should avoid direct confrontation entirely. But deep down, he knew there would be no quick victory against these humans. What they had shown today was only a fraction of what they were capable of, and to face them again without understanding the full scope of their power would be suicide. On civilian worlds across the Empire, the reaction was even more chaotic. Markets crashed as merchants predicted trade routes would shift under human influence. Civilians flooded government halls demanding to know why their leaders had provoked such a dangerous foe, and propaganda networks scrambled to rewrite the narrative. But no amount of words could erase the image of the mothership blotting out the stars. Even among allied species who had fought alongside the Zorathians, there was unease. Some began, quietly reaching out to human diplomats, offering cooperation in exchange for protection, while others withdrew their fleets from joint patrols, unwilling to risk being caught between the two powers. Ward understood this ripple effect better than anyone, that the psychological blow dealt here would do more damage to the enemy's strength than the destruction of their ships, and that over time it would force them into a defensive posture, giving humanity the advantage in choosing when and where to fight. Still, he also knew that this victory would not end the war. It would escalate it, for wounded pride was a dangerous thing, and the Zorathian Empire would not let this humiliation go unanswered. On the bridge of his battered flagship, Kraith stared into the void where the battle had raged, the debris of his fleet drifting silently, and he swore to himself that the next time he faced the humans, it would not be as a victim but as a hunter. Yet even as he made this silent vow, a small, cold voice in the back of his mind whispered the truth he could not admit aloud, that when the black giant returned, he might not have the strength to stop it. And so, the tide of the war had turned, not with the destruction of planets or the fall of capitals, but with the arrival of one ship whose shadow had stretched across the battlefield and across the hearts of all who had seen it, a shadow that promised this was only the beginning. In the hours following the battle, the void was filled with the faint movements of recovery ships drifting between fields of wreckage, their lights cutting through the darkness as they searched for anything of value, whether it be useful materials, enemy technology, or survivors who could be taken for questioning, and while the human crews worked with quiet efficiency, the air was thick with an unspoken awareness that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back. For the galaxy would not forget what had happened here. Captain Elias Ward stood at the observation deck of the Resolute, watching the Aegis as it moved slowly through the debris field, its massive hull still carrying the faint scorch marks of battle, though none of the damage was serious, and in that moment the Mothership seemed less like a ship and more like a predator surveying the remains of its hunt. Reports from across human space began to arrive, news networks replaying the battle footage endlessly, civilian populations cheering in the streets, recruitment centers overflowing with volunteers eager to join the fleet, and politicians giving speeches about unity and strength. But Ward knew it was not only allies who were watching. Hidden among the celebration were the quiet, fearful glances of those who wondered if humanity had just made itself the greatest target in the galaxy. In Zorathian space, the mood was the opposite. Streets silent, markets closed, and citizens whispering rumors of what had happened, with some refusing to believe the official reports that claimed the defeat was due to an ambush rather than overwhelming human power, while others demanded their leaders find a way to counter this new threat before Earth's fleets reached their own skies. Admiral Kraith returned to the Imperial capital with what remained of his fleet, the journey heavy with shame. And when he entered the War Council chamber, the silence that greeted him was worse than any words. The counselors simply stared, their eyes demanding an explanation he could not give, without admitting that they had underestimated the humans so completely that no strategy had been prepared for a ship like the Aegis. In secret rooms far from the public eye, the Empire's scientists and engineers were ordered to begin work on countermeasures, new weapons, faster drives, and shield systems that might stand against the Mothership's assault, while spies were sent out to infiltrate human worlds and learn where this ship had come from and how many more like it existed. On human-controlled stations, intelligence officers were already expecting such moves, and security was tightened, false information planted, and baited traps prepared for any infiltrators foolish enough to think they could steal the secrets of the Mothership. Ward himself spent long hours in the strategy room, going over every detail of the battle, not to find faults but to anticipate how the enemy might adapt, for he knew the Zorathians would not accept defeat quietly, and the next time they came they would come prepared. Yet even as military preparations continued, political pressure began to build. Other species who had remained neutral during the war now approached humanity with offers of alliance. their voices polite, but their intentions clear. They wanted protection from the Empire, and they believed humanity was now strong enough to give it. Each new agreement strengthened Earth's position, but also risked drawing it into more conflicts, and Ward knew that too many promises could stretch their fleets thin, giving the enemy opportunities to strike where they were weakest. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, rumors began to spread that the Mothership's power did not come from human engineering alone. Some claimed it was built from the remains of an ancient warship discovered in the ruins of a forgotten civilization. Others insisted it was powered by stolen alien technology, and a few whispered that it was the work of something far older and far more dangerous than either humans or Zorathians. These stories, though unconfirmed, worked in humanity's favor, for fear often grows faster in the absence of truth, and the less anyone understood about the Aegis, the more impossible it seemed to defeat it. Kraith, however, refused to be guided by fear. He began gathering his most trusted captains, not for an immediate attack, but for a campaign of calculated strikes, hit-and-run missions against human supply lines, raids on smaller colonies, and the capture of advanced technology from allied species, anything to weaken Earth before the next major confrontation. Ward anticipated this as well, and he quietly ordered the construction of hidden outposts and forward stations, caches placed in unmarked systems, so that even if main routes were cut, the fleet could still operate deep in enemy space. In the shadows of this grand strategic maneuvering, individuals on both sides began to act. Spies, mercenaries, smugglers, some for profit, some for revenge, all moving in the currents stirred by the great powers. The war, though silent in the days after the battle, was not ending. It was shifting, becoming more dangerous. For open fleets could be seen and countered, but the next moves would be made in darkness, where trust was fragile and betrayal easy. And through it all, the Aegis waited, anchored at the edge of human space like a sentinel, its black hull reflecting no light, its engines dormant, but ready to burn brighter than any star the moment its presence was required again. In the hearts of the human people, it was a symbol of hope and invincibility. In the minds of their enemies, it was a shadow that stretched across the stars, a reminder that the next time it moved, worlds might fall. The weeks after the battle brought no great fleets into open combat, yet the war did not rest, for it had simply slipped into the shadows where movements were quieter but no less deadly, and this new phase was one where trust was as dangerous as any weapon, because betrayal could destroy more than 1,000 guns. Captain Elias Ward knew it well, and each day on the Resolute he received reports not of ships destroyed, but of whispers. Colonies where supply depots were found empty, allies whose patrol routes had been subtly altered to leave gaps in their defenses, encrypted transmissions traced to unknown origins deep within human space. In the capital, the Human Council publicly spoke of peace and stability, but behind closed doors their orders were clear: root out the spies, seal the leaks, and prepare for the inevitable next strike. The Zorathian Empire was no less busy. Admiral Kraith had learned from his failure, and now, instead of throwing fleets into the teeth of the Aegis, he unleashed smaller strike groups, well-trained and fast, hitting unprotected mining stations, and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. These attacks were not meant to win territory, but to sap human resources, to stretch the fleet thin until somewhere, somehow, a weakness appeared that could be exploited. In human intelligence circles, agents worked tirelessly to track these raiding parties, following trails of trade in black markets and intercepted communications, but the Zorathians had their own network of informants, and each side hunted the other in a dangerous game where one mistake meant death. Smugglers who had once been neutral now found themselves approached by both sides with offers they could not refuse. Rare metals for information, safe passage in exchange for sabotage, protection in exchange for carrying hidden cargo to enemy space. Some played both sides until the risk grew too great, and then they vanished, their ships found drifting in silent voids, their crews gone without trace. In one corner of the galaxy, A human listening post went dark without sending a distress signal, and when a patrol ship arrived days later, they found no sign of damage, just empty corridors and consoles still running as if nothing had happened. A mystery that intelligence suspected was the work of an elite Zorathian infiltration team. Ward took these reports personally, for each one was a reminder that the enemy had adapted, learning from their defeat, and he knew they would not show themselves until they believed they had a chance to strike the Aegis directly. To counter this, Ward began moving his ships in unpredictable patterns, never using the same route twice, sending decoy convoys with fake cargo, and planting false intelligence where enemy spies were sure to find it. His goal was simple: to make the Zorathians doubt their own information, to slow their planning with uncertainty. Meanwhile, in the Empire, Kraith listened to his intelligence chiefs report on strange human fleet movements and contradictory data, some suggesting the Aegis was being refitted for even greater power, others claiming it had left human space entirely, perhaps on a secret mission to strike deep into Zorathian territory. These conflicting reports unsettled him, for he could not tell if they were truth or lies, and he began to suspect that the humans had mastered the art of using fear as a weapon as well as any fleet. Still, he pressed forward, ordering his spies to focus not on the mothership itself, but on the worlds that built it, the factories that fed its systems, the scientists who improved its weapons. If he could not strike the giant directly, he would starve it. On human worlds, security tightened until some civilians began to complain of lost freedoms, but the majority accepted the measures, remembering the image of the mothership blotting out the stars and believing that anything was worth keeping it safe. Ward visited several of these worlds in person, speaking to workers and engineers, reminding them that their efforts were as important as any battle, and though his words were calm, his mind was restless, for he knew the silent war was reaching, a point where one move could tip the balance. Late one night in the strategy room, he looked at the galaxy map lit before him and saw how the enemy raids were forming a pattern. Not random strikes, but a slow tightening around certain sectors, as if they were herding human forces toward a specific point. If his suspicion was correct, the Zorathians were preparing something larger, a coordinated strike meant to catch the mothership away from its main support. He ordered increased reconnaissance in those sectors, but he kept the suspicion to himself, not wanting to alert the enemy by shifting forces too quickly. In the Empire, Kraith felt a similar pressure building. His raiding parties were beginning to succeed in drawing human attention, but he could sense that time was against him, for every day that passed allowed the humans to build more ships, forge more alliances, and strengthen their defenses. And so both sides continued their moves in the darkness, neither willing to show their full hand, yet both knowing that sooner or later the silent war would break into the open again, and when it did, the blow would fall hard and fast. Through it all, the Aegis remained still at the edge of human space, silent and cold. But its presence was never forgotten, for every spy who crept through shadows and every captain who planned an attack did so with the same thought lingering at the back of their mind. When the mothership returned, would they be ready, or would the stars go dark once more? The trap had been weeks in the making, its threads woven quietly through false reports, staged convoys, and carefully leaked intelligence that painted a picture the Zorathian command could not resist. A picture of the Aegis far from home, isolated, near the border of a resource-rich but lightly defended sector, vulnerable to a swift strike that could cripple humanity's greatest weapon before it could respond. And Admiral Kraith, hungry to erase the shame of his past defeat, committed every available warship to the plan, believing he had found the moment that would change the course of the war. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Elias Ward watched as reports came in from scouts hidden across the sector, each confirming what he had hoped. The Zorathian armada was moving exactly where he wanted it, drawn in by the bait. The bait itself was a decoy, a massive freighter rigged to appear in every scan and visual sensor as the Aegis, complete with heat signatures, shield readings, and even false communications designed to mimic the mothership's command codes. It drifted along a carefully plotted course that would lead the enemy straight into the chosen killing ground, a narrow region of space between two dense asteroid belts, where maneuvering would be difficult and escape routes few. As the alien fleet closed in, Ward gave the silent order, and hidden human ships, lying cold and powered down among the asteroids, came alive like predators stirred from hibernation. Cruisers, frigates, and corvettes emerged from the shadows, their weapons already locked on targets, while minefields planted days earlier armed themselves, their sensor webs waiting to detect the first hostile presence. The Zorathians never saw it coming. Their sensors were locked on the decoy, their formation tight and eager for the kill, and when the first mines detonated, tearing open the leading destroyers in blossoms of fire, confusion spread through their ranks. Then the asteroid fields lit up as concealed railgun batteries, mounted on massive rock faces and disguised to look like natural formations, opened fire, their high-velocity slugs ripping through alien hulls with brutal efficiency. Kraith barked for evasive maneuvers, but in the narrow corridor, ships collided, broke formation, and became easy targets for the human warships that now surged forward from hiding. Plasma bolts and missile barrages filled the void, turning the ambush into a slaughter. Still, the Zorathians fought back, their heavier cruisers unleashing sustained beam fire that cut through several human corvettes, and for a moment the battle teetered on the edge of chaos. That was when the Aegis arrived. Not in retreat, not damaged, but descending from hyperspace at the corridor's far end, blocking the only exit. The sight alone broke whatever discipline remained in the alien ranks. They had been lured, cornered, and now trapped between the full might of the human fleet and the black giant that had already burned its legend into their memory. The Aegis wasted no time. Its forward cannons erupted in blinding arcs of energy, slicing through 3 enemy battleships in a single strike, while its flanking batteries picked off those attempting to turn back. The corridor became a cage, and inside it the Zorathian armada was torn apart ship by ship. Kraith, refusing to accept defeat, rallied his flagship and a handful of escorts to break through the Aegis directly, hoping to at least damage the Mothership enough to justify the cost of the assault. The charge was desperate and doomed. The Mothership's shields shimmered under the barrage but held firm, and as the alien flagship closed to firing range, a concentrated volley from the Aegis's main guns ripped through its center, splitting it apart in a silent explosion that scattered molten debris into the void. Without their leader, the remaining Zorathian ships faltered, and human forces swept through the survivors with ruthless precision until only drifting wreckage remained. Silence returned to the corridor, broken only by the crackle of comms as Ward ordered search and rescue for any human survivors and salvage crews to secure the battlefield. Across the galaxy, the battle's outcome spread faster than light, carried by military channels, civilian broadcasts, and whispered rumor. Earth had not only defended its weapon, but had used it to turn the enemy's ambition against them, proving once again that humanity's rise could not be stopped. In the war rooms of the Human Council, leaders spoke quietly of pushing deeper into Zorathian territory, while Ward stood on the bridge of the Resolute, gazing at the silent shape of the Aegis, knowing that this victory, like all victories, was only a moment's breath before the next storm. But for now, the stars were clear, and the shadow of the Mothership still loomed large in the minds of those who dared to challenge Earth.